King Ratatouille, Champs-Élysées, sipping on Alizé, put it all on my plate, get to chewing. Green fairy, long Harry, don't carry Matt Derry, she blew me. And now we rolling through Paris. Blowing Eiffel Towers with a sweet and a sour, that's flower, say Bueller, that's Ferris.
But I'm going to just go ahead and invite Jay Schiffman up to share his story. So let's give it up for Jay.
Welcome to the Choose Your Struggle podcast. I am your host, Jay Schiffman. Welcome back to episode 17 of the Choose Your Struggle podcast. Thank you for joining, as always. Going to be a slightly different episode today. There's no shout out. I wanted the extra time for the interview. The interview today is with Joey Talmadge, who some of you may know by his musical alter ego, Hoodie Time. His music is great. You heard a little bit of it on the way in. You'll hear some on the way out. Please go check him out on Spotify or wherever you get your music. We recorded this back in middle of May, that would have been. At the time, the biggest thing going on, or the thing that was being covered the most by the news, let's put it that way, was the coronavirus. So I'm going to save my normal talking about the interview for the end, because I want to open with a more important topic. This is being recorded the week of June 1st as the country is burning. We have ignored this problem for too long. It's hard to find the right words to even talk about this. I lead an incredibly privileged life. I grew up in a Jewish household that I never wanted for anything. And that privilege went beyond that to being able, given the opportunity, to learn from and interact from many different communities. I've talked about this before. You know, I was so lucky I went to a private school where most people were what you expect from a private school, but I was so lucky. I don't know why I had this privilege, but I did, to early on befriend those who were different. And since then, my closest friends have been different. And I'm not saying that in the sense of, oh, my best friends are no, fuck that. I'm saying that in the sense of, look how incredibly lucky I was to learn about other communities and other points of view and diversity in every meaning of that word at a young age. I count that as a blessing, and I consider that blessing all the time. And that meant the good and the bad. I had enough experiences to know or to learn that I know nothing. I had the curtain pulled back for me. I got the glimpse, the one that said, experience this for a minute and then leave here knowing that you know nothing. Did it suck being pulled over on multiple occasions and searched by cops in white neighborhoods for committing the crime of driving with black people in the car? Yeah, it sucked. But what sucks a billion times more is having that fear every time you get in the car. Did it suck being accused of stealing at malls and thrown out of malls on multiple occasions because the group I was with was predominantly black? Yeah, it sucked. But it sucks a billion times more to fear that every time you go in public. White people need to recognize their privilege. And when we don't, we need to listen. If somebody says this is your privilege, yeah, it's okay to get upset. It is. It is okay to get upset. And then get the fuck over it. And then get the fuck over it and listen. No one's saying you can't be upset. No one's saying you shouldn't feel your emotions. Those emotions are real. They're valid. But then get over it. That is the important piece. Feel your emotions and then get over it and say, I'm ready to listen. I am sure that I'm going to lose some listeners with this. That's fine. Maybe I won't. Maybe 100% of my listenership is like, yeah, right on. I doubt it. If I'm recording this the day after our president had the military tear gas hundreds, if not thousands, of peaceful protesters, had the military physically abuse journalists who were recording them doing this. The videos are out there. They're all over Twitter. They're all over social media as a whole. So that he could take a photo op in front of a church. If it fooled you, I'm sorry for you. If you weren't outraged, if you saw that militaristic, if you saw those actions, those Gestapo actions, those dictator actions and went right on, then get the fuck out. This podcast isn't for you. Not this episode. This podcast isn't for you. I don't want you as a fan. I feel so horribly sad for you that you've made it this far in your life with that incorrect. I don't even have the words for that. We all need to work to make this change, and it's not just voting. It's not. It's just not. Go back and listen to my episode with Tessa Schwann, the activist, and listen to how our ignored communities feel about this election. Listen to how they're already mourning 2020's election for once again not getting a choice. You can get mad at me if you want. That's fine. This idea that we have that voting is going to fix this is a white person's idea. Yes, it will. In a perfect society, voting would fix this. But our system is not set up for them. Our system is set up for us. There have been more slave-holding presidents, more white nationalist presidents than our one black president. And yet we think that this system is the answer. No, we have to change this system. I'm going to finish this intro with a moment of silence for all those who've been lost. And not just Mr. Floyd or Mr. Aubrey, or I could go on and on and on. I mean, look, when I'm recording this, there are two, in the last 3 days, there have been two more unarmed black people murdered by cops. One of them, by the way, this Louisville one, the second one, it was during a protest. The cops turned off their cameras and murdered a man. It's so out there that I don't remember if it's I think it was the mayor of Louisville fired the police chief. And nothing is being done about it. Right, they're not hiding this one. This isn't like the other one you got to search for. I mean, it's only on social media. It was a trans person who was murdered in Tallahassee, I believe it was. This one in Louisville, it's being talked about and nothing is being done. The police chief got fired and everyone's like, oh, good, victory. No. They murdered a man. They turned off their cameras and murdered a man. Unarmed. Protesters have, they're mad at them for throwing water bottles. The cops have military-style weapons, military-style body armor, and they're using the throwing of water bottles as justification to attack unarmed protesters. I'm going to end this with this moment of silence, and then we'll go into the ads and into the interview. Stick around afterwards. I'll talk about the interview with Joey, and your good egg and your card. I'm angry. I'm sad. I am a lot of emotions. I love you. If you're still listening and you're like seething, go do your own research or reach out to me. You can find me at my website, www.jschiffman.com. Find me on social media. Normally, I'm not nearly as active on Twitter, but, the last week, I haven't been saying a lot. I've just been retweeting. I think a lot of these messages need to be out there. Find me on LinkedIn or Facebook at Jay Schiffman or on Instagram at The Next Schiffman. Black Lives Matter. Huge shout out to my podcast sponsor, Mountain Made CBD. Mountain Made is changing the CBD game by offering a line of high-dose CBD tablets at an affordable price. Their products are THC-free and third-party tested for accuracy, cleanliness, and potency. Their products, which now ship nationwide, include Build for CBD saturation, Boost for precision titration, and Recover for rest and rehab. With 9 years experience in hemp and fitness, Mountain Made's founders are focused on creating a quality CBD product to help those with activated lifestyles. Check out www.mountainmade.life to find out more about how their product can help you crush your life. And I'm all about that. Remember, their products ship nationwide, so go check out the website today and follow them on social media at Mountain Made. And also listen to episode 7 with Mountain Made founder Mike Passion. All right, back to the episode. So we'll start with this. You and I go real far back. Besides Gabe Kalubi, who gave a shout out a couple episodes ago, you are definitely the longest person that will be on this podcast so far. And I think that's going to be really interesting because as you and I were chatting about when we were talking about doing this, you and I were kind of going through our shit right around the same time, which is really interesting. And not only the time frame overlap, but we also then overlapped at that time.
Same room, dude. Yeah.
So tell that story real quick for our listeners.
All right. So, man, this is wild. I don't know if we've even in detail relived this. And I know that it's, you know, this is a podcast about recovery and stuff. I'll try to be delicate with the whole fact that it's a war story at the end of the day. So we were all hanging out. I ended up not going to Arizona State. I got into the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. I was going to do creative writing. But I didn't go there because I wanted to go follow a girl to Cincinnati. That didn't work out. And then, you know, I dealt with it in certain ways. And I also failed out for a little while. Yeah, right there with you. And met this dude through you, funny enough. And my band at the time, Space Cake, you know, we played house parties, we played regular venues, but we just had a good time. I'd still look back at those days. I think it was fun. But this dude asked us to play a house party. And we ended up saying, yeah, hell yeah. He was, you know, wasn't going to pay us anything, but, you know, free drugs and free drinking all night. And we're 19 years old. We're like, this is awesome. We're like the main event for this thing. Huge house party. And it got thick back in those days. Like those
huge. We can't like overstate that. It was like too big, huge, like multiple houses.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't know if you and I, Jay, have even gone into detail about what happened to me that night.
I will say full out, I don't I remember that night, but I don't remember that night.
So we set up and we started playing the party, and the party got thick. And at one point, I was definitely drinking, I was definitely smoking, and I ate some mushrooms. I know that at the time I was starting to get really, really into my own head at that time in life, and I started picking up Klonopins. And so that was really taking me out. And I was just like faded. And, you know, this show was like my escape. I was going to be fucking Jim Morrison for the night. You know, I was going to be Jimi Hendrix for the night because fuck everything that's happening in my life. This is cool. I feel important. And at one point I got up on top of an amplifier and I was playing a guitar solo, and dude handed me a blunt. And well, not handed me, like put it in my mouth because I'm playing guitar, and just put it in my mouth and lit it. And I kept playing and smoking the blunt and then switching sides to blow the air out. And just like, I was like, I'm going to do this. And, you know, I had homies take it away from me at one point, but that's the last I remember of the party. And the next thing I know, it's like 4 p.m. the next day. I am in Madeira, which for our listeners is like what, 20 miles, 20 miles north of
solid 15 to 20 minute drive without traffic away from where
on the highway. Yeah. Right. So it's 4 p.m. the next day. We're in Madeira, and I'm in my car with my shirt off and all my music gear in the back. Well, half my music gear in the back. And the guitarist is sitting next to me, and we're in the driveway at my grandma's house in Madeira. And I'm like, what happened last night? Good gracious. Maybe I have some issues right now. And he was like, oh, bro, how you doing? I was like, not good. I don't remember anything what happened last night. And he was like, oh, I sprinkled something in that blunt so we could give it to you. I was like, oh my God, what have you done to me? And I punched him in the face, and we started not hanging out anymore. But I then, I mean, to lead into the whole how I started my recovery type thing, that night I took a grip of acid and wanted to just completely leave planet Earth for a while. And I came down the next morning and randomly got a phone call from my dad, who I hadn't seen in months, hadn't heard from in months, because I was either living at one of y'all houses or in my Nissan. And he was like, dude, I miss you. You want to just come hang out and have dinner tonight? And I was like, fuck, that sounds dope, but I'm coming down. Maybe not. But I was like, fuck it. So I drove over, and we had dinner. And we didn't have dinner. My mom served up the plates, and I just started crying at the dinner table. And I told them everything. And within a week later, I was in the wilderness of Utah learning how to make fire with 2 sticks. And after that, it was, 12 months inpatient at a really cool but strange place in Arizona. and the rest is history. That was 10 years ago now, 11 years ago now.
So here's how we bring this sort of into the story that most of my listeners know about me. I was actually on a podcast that just dropped where we talked about, there's a saying in recovery that's like, I wouldn't trade my worst day now for my best day and when I was using, and how that's a bunch of bullshit, right? Because we had a lot of fun. It just got out of control, I mean, like, and that's the problem with using, with people like us that have issues with addiction. And my like greatest times, but also my like, okay, things are really starting to spiral times are this period. So this is how this all kind of melds together. Looking back, it was an awesome time. These kind of nights were 4 or 5 times a week. Like, that's what we were doing. And it was amazing, but it was also horrible looking back. No wonder my life spiraled out of control.
That's the thing too. And like, man, when you're going at it, and I mean, at that point in time, you're not thinking that you have a problem either. It's not looking back on it now. It's like oh, there were some issues going on. In hindsight, I should have been worried about myself during that party, but feelings are feelings, experiences are experiences. And it's, I think it's like you said, some things that you hear in the rooms or, in recovery in general can be bullshit. One of the things I think is bullshit is don't tell war stories or, don't hype them up, Man, it's all right. We had great times. And I think that if you don't have those times, you're not going to appreciate the fact that you can still have them on a normal level later in your life. And if you don't relive those moments, sometimes maybe you lose sight of who you could still become. That's still you. It's you 11 years ago, but it's you.
Yeah, and you make a really great point with the don't tell war stories. And that's one that was like really bored into like when we were going through our first recovery, but isn't as much, thankfully, anymore, because we're starting to move away. The don't tell war stories comes from the just say no sort of drug approach, where it's like, if we don't talk about how much fun they can be, kids won't experiment, which is a bunch of bullshit. And, this idea that if we try to pretend that, every time we were fucked up was horrible, we won't want to go back and use again. Well, that's bullshit. I mean, and that's also allowing a cop out. If your recovery is so fragile that even remembering a good time would cause a setback, then your recovery is too fragile, and we need to do some more work to help you there.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it also shouldn't be surprising that, you and I both ended up in recovery. And not only that, another young woman whose name I won't mention, who was at that party not long after this, when I wake up in an inpatient center, I come to after an overdose, and like 2 days later, she walks in and she looks at me and goes, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And the last time we had seen each other was that party.
Wow.
Yeah. So like that party, I'm sure we weren't the only ones. You know what I mean? Like there were a lot of people coming together that night that were doing a lot that they shouldn't have been doing. And so it shouldn't be that surprising. But this is all, you and I had known each other for a pretty good amount of time at this point, because we first met at Seven Hills.
At Seven Hills, and we would have met, you went to Locke Speech, didn't you?
I did.
Right. So then we would have met when you were in 5th grade and I was in 3rd grade, but we started to become friends because I became friends with, I think, Gavin Tabor first, and you through Gavin when I was in 6th grade and you guys were in 8th grade.
Yeah. And then we kind of lost touch. We got back in touch when we were both in Clifton hanging out. You were doing the Space Cake thing, which, by the way, was a great band. I mean, you're selling fun, it short. Man. You guys, that CD you put out was pretty damn good.
Thank you.
And it shouldn't be a surprise. Well, I guess I'd say it this way. It's not a surprise to me or anyone else that was a big Space Cake fan that you are starting to have a bunch of success as Hoodie Time, because, you were making great, very different music with Space Cake, that it's not surprising. You were already on that path towards making really good music.
Cheers, bro. Thanks. That means a lot, because Space Cake was something special, man. It was super different. I think I've always prided myself on the fact that at the end of the day, at least nothing else in the market sounds like what I make.
But like we were just saying, we spent a solid year. I did very little other than party, and you were a big part of that scene. I mean, the Clifton party scene was everything we could have wanted if that's what you're looking for. You referenced Project X, which was kind of a period piece almost. And you couldn't do that kind of thing anymore, but that was lived experience for us.
Oh, absolutely. They would shut down Wheeler Street that whole day just because the cops said, if you can't beat them, join them.
Right.
And I remember vividly the best night, one of the best nights of my life still to this day was actually during that period at your house with some of our closest nuclear friends. And it wasn't a party night. It was just us. And we were watching the states roll in as Barack Obama became our president. And as soon as they called, I think it was actually Ohio that was the last one they called to put him over the mark at 271. I remember taking the bongs in the streets, and it wasn't just us. All of Victor Street was in the street. People were hooting and hollering, ripping bongs and drinking beers and pouring out in the street. And even though it is definitely ingrained in those times of the catalyst times to my downfall, my worst period. Like you said, you wouldn't trade the best day in recovery. I wouldn't trade any day for any day because that day still exists and I loved that
100%.
day.
Yeah. The night Obama, won was sort of the highest peak of that period for all of us. And
absolutely.
What was so beautiful about our sort of group of friends, but not only that, the house that at that point we're all living together, like 11 of us are in this house. People like you who aren't living with us are there almost every day.
Yeah.
It is a very diverse group. And so that night, putting aside the fact that almost every single person in that house is struggling with substances and, mental health issues, that night, none of that shit mattered. And it was just all of us being able to celebrate this thing that, first Black president, this is a big deal. This is a momentous occasion and a truly a barrier breaking down. And I mean, you're not wrong. We were in the streets celebrating like you wouldn't believe if you hadn't lived through this period. There were great moments.
Yeah.
And as you said, we both ended up, it's not surprising we both ended up sort of heading towards rehab after this. Very different experiences.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make you talk about anything you don't want to, but if you would want to talk about your experience, that would be fantastic.
Oh, dude, yeah, I'm an open book. It kind of started when I was in middle school, actually, when we were first becoming friends. I had a hard time with some of the kids that came over from the other school. Jay and I went to a school that two primary schools merge into a junior high situation. And, the quintessential story of kids from the other side of the track, And so some of the kids just really gave me a hard time when they came and joined our school. And I had never dealt with that before. I was always just a kid who was a chameleon and could fit into any group and didn't have a friend group, just belonged to everyone's friend group, And it wasn't the case anymore. And my mom got a little bit worried about my sadness all the time because I wasn't having a good time in school anymore. And I started seeing some therapists, and back in the day, that was kind of when the huge pharmaceutical ramp up of the ADD craze happened. And put your kid on Ritalin, put your kid on Adderall, and so they did that, and I think that started messing with me pretty hard. And by the time I was a freshman, sophomore in high school, I had seen probably, I'm not even lying, 10 or 12 different shrinks. Because I didn't want to go. I didn't feel like I had to go, but I was forced to go to these psychiatrists because it was the only way that they would give me the medicine that my parents wanted me on. And let me just say before I continue, I don't blame my parents at all. It's probably really hard to be a parent. And I'm going to have to be a parent someday, hopefully, and that's going to be hard. But I wish it wouldn't happen. Not mad at it. I digress. So anyway, I see all these therapists. They switch me drug to drug to drug. And then I start experimenting with some drugs in high school, and I figured the best way to pay for these drugs is to just sell my Adderall. I don't want to take it anyway. So I started selling Adderall in high school, which in hindsight was the stupidest thing I could have done. I could have gone to jail for decades. I mean, that's terrible stuff. And I would use the money to buy legal drugs because I didn't know where I could get my hands on anything else other than weed. And so, you know, they had the smoke shops had the salvia, and they had these legal highs or whatever.
Can we stop for a second and say how crazy it is? Because I used to do salvia too. That shit was illegal to be sold in a store. It was like the precursor to bath salts.
Bro, I got it at the smoke shop in Clifton on
100%.
Vine Street or on Jefferson. Everyone knows that's where you get everything you need.
Yeah.
And I would get the 100X. It came anywhere from 5X to 100X, and that's the potency of it.
Yeah.
And when you smoke that 100X, you leave Earth, dude.
100%. I had some of the worst trips I've ever had on 100X salvia. It's short, but it's some of the most intense trips you'll ever have.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Yeah, man.
It's like
salvia.
It's like the dark side of DMT. If 100%. It were a yin yang, that's the dark hole, and DMT is the light hole, bro. Yep. Oh my God. And so I started just frying my brain on some stuff. And at that point, I lost my grandfather. It impacted my mother a lot. And I didn't understand at the time why she was the way she was. And way later in life, my dad told me some things that I didn't know, and mom needed some help too, getting over that huge impact on her life. And so as a kid, though, I didn't understand why sometimes she's short with me or couldn't be there for me, or like was, acting the way I didn't want her to act. And part of that was just sending me to more therapists and putting me now on SSRIs. They had thought that maybe I was dual diagnosis, or, dealing with something like bipolar. But then going back and forth with more therapists and more different SSRIs, it's not good for your brain. And at a certain point, I just stopped taking all the drugs, and I started taking my own drugs. And that kind of brings us to where we started hanging out in college, because then it wasn't just Joey smokes weed and kind of sometimes drinks the salvia. It's Joey has an issue with some Klonopin, and Joey's, when he's tripping, he's not tripping to have a positive experience and learn something and grow. He's tripping to leave the world.
Yeah. So, in that respect, our stories are very similar. My thing, I was addicted to all my medication, but Klonopin was the one that I was really abusing the most after, and it all started from ADHD medication. And, our stories are not unique in that way. I quote this a lot, but when you're only a couple years younger than me, when I was, the year I turned 1 in 1987, there was something like 300,000 kids that were prescribed something for ADHD. By the time I'm 11, when I started taking it, it was almost 2 million. So our generation was used as like sort of lab rats. And as you correctly pointed out, it was to just get your kid on Ritalin, get them on Adderall, whatever the case is.
And they had the schools advocating it, bro. I mean, they had the school counselors and guidance counselors, and they had a whole school nurse and drug program.
Yep. And it's not surprising, from what we now know about brain development, that so many people with our story end up going through struggles with addiction. Is, if you experiment at a young age, you are X times more likely to develop a substance use disorder. We weren't experimenting. We were being taught to experiment. And so it's not surprising. So, we're going through this at the same time. Your sort of pivot happens before mine, and luckily for you, doesn't happen with a suicide attempt.
Yeah. I decided that I needed help. I needed to get somewhere where I could not party, and where I could not escape the issues that were going on in my head that I didn't want to face. And, recovery is a funny thing, because when you get into it, you don't have an issue. All you think you need is to not be doing the drugs. That ain't it, bro. So then when you keep going through recovery, you start to realize every year, even though I'm not in the rooms anymore or technically like living a life of recovery per se anymore, I'm still recovered from those behaviors and those specific crutches that I couldn't let go
100%.
of. And even though I'm not in the rooms, every year I kind of look back and I realize I'm bigger and better than I was last year. And this is what I've learned. And I continue to learn things, and the experiences that we have, even the bad ones like we were talking about, lead to all that growth. So I had to go through quite a phase to get out of myself and to get out of my routines of dealing with myself. It started with 3 months in the wilderness in Utah, which I would never trade for the world. It was awesome. And when the apocalypse comes, call me, because I have got the primitive skills. We can rebuild. So it started with that. I thought it was just going to be that. I thought I was going to come home after 3 months. That was not the case. I had divulged in my acid come down, when you are, of course, very perceptive to emotion and openness and truth. I had divulged literally everything. So it wasn't 3 months for young Joseph. I ended up going to 12 months of at a place called Gatehouse Academy in Wickenburg, Arizona. They put it in Wickenburg because there ain't shit for miles, so you're not getting away. Started out at a ranch there for 3 months, and then at what they called main campus in the main town of Wickenburg for 9 months. I learned the big book. I was in the rooms 8 times a week. And I worked almost the entire time on a horse ranch 6 days a week, where 5 days a week we would train the horses, clean the horses, feed the horses, and take care of all the tack and stable stuff. And on the Saturdays, we would get up at 6 in the morning. We would light up our Marlboro Reds, and we would ride these horses bareback miles into the desert with our cast iron pans. We would have cowboy breakfast once a week. So it was those new experiences and crazy things that no one gets to live through, kind of like, you know, some of the darker times and fun times that we live through. We often forget that a lot of people, I mean, most people don't live through those kinds of things that we live through. So now I'm finding new, I'm always, that's who I am. I need adventure and I need new stuff. And so now I'm finding that, but I'm not getting completely loaded off of 7 substances in a night, you know? And even though it's a place where I'm not allowed to leave, I'm meeting people who I still keep in touch with now 10 years later. And I'm meeting people who I eventually will have lost 10 years later. And, you know, I did about 4 or 5 months at a halfway house afterwards before I decided it was time to come back and finish college and get the music thing going again. And I stayed like completely stone cold sober, probably until the age of maybe 23, 24. And I was having some really, really bad anxiety issues. And now by the way, I don't see therapists anymore. I haven't taken a pharmaceutical in, 5 years. Completely cold turkey off of anything, given from a doctor or by my own prescription. But I started having this real bad anxiety in university, and it was bad to the point where every morning I woke up, if there was something to vomit, I would vomit, and if there wasn't, I would dry heave. And it was almost like these really intense terror panic attacks every morning before I go to school. And that's when I knew that my problem wasn't drugs. My solution was drugs for the longest time. My problems are very, very deep. And that's when I started going to doctors. I went to 3 or 4 doctors. I got every test in the book, man. I got tested for cancers and they shot blue liquid through my blood and took pictures of that. I don't know what they do, but they said, look, we're not finding anything. We think you're just suffering from extreme anxiety, and there's some things that you need to work out. And I talked to my doctor and I said, well, what's going to fix it? And he was like, well, listen, it's getting to that point where states are starting to legalize everything. And have you thought about that? That's the last, because anything they've given me in any test, this is a year and a half now with this type of anxiety, nothing worked. And I'm about 23 maybe at this point. And he was like, well, do you think that was ever an issue? And I was like, no, I've always stood by the stance that it's from the earth and it's of the greatest worth, and that's okay. And so somewhat reluctantly, I went to what I told myself was going to be my last meeting, at the Proud Rooster in Clifton.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, this is going on in my life, and in the morning tomorrow, I'm going to have a puff and see if it does anything. And I hope, that I can still come back from time to time and catch up with you guys, and we can, keep in touch outside the rooms. And that's how I left it. And we still keep in touch outside the rooms, which is great. But I woke up that next morning and I had some, and my anxiety it was gone within literally 30 seconds. I didn't have to throw up. I went and I aced an exam that day. And ever since, it's just been, weed when I need it. And as far as my inside self, I just have been at most times, not all times, vigilant about letting the people who love me and care about me know exactly what's going on in my head. Not always the best at it, but that's my line of defense now. I haven't had really a morning episode in almost 5 or 6 years now since that happened. And I haven't touched anything else that I used to have those nasty, nasty issues with. And I think that every year I learn a little bit more about who I am. And with that, I am a little bit more comfortable with who I am. I don't know if you know, Jay, but I'm adopted. And when I was 26, 27, I was living in Los Angeles. I was maybe only in LA for a year or so. And some of my biological relatives started reaching out to me on Facebook. I didn't know how to deal with it. And it really hit me hard, because one of them, the first thing they ever did was ask me for money. Oh. And one of them, my biological half brother, is just a saint and a gem, and we keep in touch from time to time. And he came at me with some heartfelt, I just want to make sure that before anything happens, I talked to my brother once, and so we keep in touch from time to time. And it was people's different approaches that kind of took me this way and that way with the whole situation. It's hard enough, being 26 and hearing from your blood for the first time in your life. But when people are coming at it in very different angles, and all at once, man, it throws you for a loop. And I remember that when I was going through that, I didn't want to reach towards any drugs. Old me would have, 19, 20-year-old Joey definitely would have. Give me some K-pins, give me some acid. I'll just leave the world for a while. But all I wanted was my friends. And my two best friends came over, and my roommates and girl were there. And everyone just sat on the couch with me and just let me cry. And then I told them everything that happened and everything that people said. And I don't really remember the rest of the night, because we smoked a few blunts and played Mario Kart after that very emotional hangout. But that's when I realized that the best medicine is human connection. It was never these hard drugs that I was into that completely destroyed me, and it led me to completely endless black holes. It was people. I needed connection, and I needed what was going on inside my head to be understood and to be heard from someone else. Because even at the end of the day, if I'm not in complete support of myself, at least I know that there are people who completely support me. And through experiences like that, and crazy life experiences like moving to New Zealand and just whatever life throws at you, I learned something new. But it's always the common denominator is always that friendship and human connection. I think I've learned is the apex, the keystone of that pyramid of human needs. The hierarchy starts with complete human connection. I think that's more important than water, food, shelter any day. And I think that is the biggest savior in my recovery, is that I have people. And that's, man, people fucking help, man.
Complete human connection and, you know, high Mario Kart. Those are the two needs on Maslow's, you know, hierarchy.
Absolutely. I truly believe that, man.
So before we continue, give a shout out where people can find you and what you want people to go look at.
Right. Cool. Right. So, I mean, we talked about a little bit of music. My current project, I go by Hoodie Time. That's HOODYTIME. And I'm all over. You can find me, just Google Hoodie Time. If you want to find me on Instagram, it's just at Hoodie Time. And if you want to find me on Spotify, Apple, Google, anything. Wherever you get your music, you'll find old Hoodie sitting there ready for a listen.
You will find Hoodie Time. And that rolls directly into, so you rocketed up these charts, right?
I put out 4 songs in 2018 and they all charted on iTunes, Beatport, and some Russian sites as well. The Russians love the techno and the house stuff that I do, you know.
But how do you go from so you're fresh in recovery, you moved to LA, to charting in New Zealand? Like,
yeah, there needs to be some glue, I guess, to these.
100%. You're missing a bunch of glue in there.
All right, let's put some glue in there. So basically, LA is just struggle town, bro. LA, the best and the worst. And I moved out there because I was in a hip hop group for a while, my last few years in Cincinnati, called Flowhio. And we were starting to get pretty good at what we were doing. You know, we had a few small East Coast and Midwest tours and whatnot, and signed to this label in Dublin, which never worked out. You know, we were going to do a European tour, but, you know, things happen, you know. Anyway, so I moved to LA to go solo and to start Hoodie Time. And I worked a dead-end job at an outdoor retail store. And I worked 40 hours a week. I would come home, get some taco truck, make some music, go to bed. That was my life. Sometimes cry and smoke blunts and play Mario Kart. So that was the deal. And I wasn't playing any shows at all. I started Hoodie Time maybe the end of 2015, and my first show wasn't until my farewell show to go to New Zealand for my first tour, not to move there, but to go there for my first tour in January of 2017. So I spent a year and a half just making a couple EPs and making singles and collaborating and working my ass off to do press releases and make sure that the music got heard before I spent time and energy on touring. Touring is where we make all our money as an artist, but it wasn't about money back then. I had a job that paid for all the recording and paid for all my bills. But I wanted to make sure that I had something that was off the ground before I made an appearance anywhere and before I really, really started. Build a catalog and then just smash it. So I realized that between SoundCloud and Spotify, most of my streams outside the US were coming from the Gold Coast of Australia and in New Zealand. And Liat, my girlfriend, her father is of New Zealand descent. And we figured, hey, why don't we kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Let's have an epic 2-week vacation, but let's book 6 to 8 shows along the way and start racking up some more listens in New Zealand. You know, there's already some family connection there. Why not? So about nine months out, I started, you know, contacting the radio stations over there. Some of them were already playing my stuff, which was dope. And I set up 7 shows, and we toured. We played a show in Hollywood first, and then we went to New Zealand for 2 weeks and played 7 shows. Had some awesome off days, and we just fell in love with the place. I mean, Liat had been there 25 times, you know, for her whole life. We're 30 now, and she's been going her whole life. But I truly fell in love with the place, and I thought, I've always been a man of my word. I've always said that if the government gets too ridiculous and I'm unable to ethically support them with my tax dollars, that I would go to Canada. Well, fuck Canada. I'm not really. I'm sorry. I like you Canadians. Canadians are good. Tim Hortons all day. But why not go to New Zealand? So I got a visa. I booked a 22-date tour and came over here and did the damn thing. And there's been 3 tours since, and music festivals, and a #1 hip hop record, and a #3 hip hop record, and some more top 10 hip hop records. It's been good, dude. I just ended like a 9-month hiatus off of making new music. I took a year off to kind of recharge. I only played like 5 or 6 shows in the last year that I've taken off. But I got 12 songs done during this whole quarantine thing. I've learned that I can do that. So if I'm ever lazy again, someone should just slap me.
So I have one more big question, then a couple rapid fire ones that end every interview.
Yeah.
You work in an industry that is not only not conducive to good mental health, it fuels the opposite, right? I mean, You're working in an industry that plays up. It would be really hard to keep a level head for most people if they were like, oh shit, like almost 20,000 people listen to me every month. So how do you stay grounded? How do you protect your mental health in this industry?
Oh man, that's a good one. Oh, that's deep. Cause most times, bro, I don't think about it, but sometimes I do catch myself thinking about it. We're on track to hit 1 million streams on Spotify. Like I think on Monday, probably.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. That'll be a big milestone. I've never hit 1 million on a single platform yet, so that's good. But yeah, sometimes I do see those numbers, and at one point I was getting super excited because between New Year's and maybe last month, I was clocking around 28,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. And, on the dashboard, you can see where they're from and how they listen. You can see everything about them. And all they can see about you is what you give the internet to show them. And Hoodie Time is not Joey Talmadge, So that, I think, is the weirdest thing about it, is that people see me and they hear my art. And even though I've created this persona and this brand, and that's the point of it, they're not seeing the actual me. They may be hearing snippets from my life through my lyrics. And that is one of the things that keeps me grounded, is people actually resonate with the lyrics. I think that I would feel a lot less comfortable with it if I didn't get the messages from the people that I do. I have a song called Abandon. It's about my adoption. And I've had countless people reach out to me and say that song saved their life. Says that, they say it helped me accept myself as an adopted kid. It helped me give up my child when I thought I couldn't. Like, I've gotten some wild, crazy stories through that song, and through other works. But that song in particular, the messages I get from it make all of the weirdness of being a zoo animal okay. And I don't think that I have come to terms with the fact that it's quite possible that it could get bigger and it could get weirder and feel weirder. But at the end of the day, I try to focus on the positive aspects of it. I try to not think about it in the first place, really, other than, this is a milestone. I should share this with my followers. Thank you for all the streams. But the other thing is that I don't pay attention almost at all to anything going on in the music industry. I get my music by searching Apple or Spotify for things that I've listened to my whole life. I still listen to Blink-182 every day. I don't care. And I get it through friends who I care about, who care about me, who send me links in my personal chats and stuff. I try very hard not to, I'll get into some new bands and new DJs and I'll listen to the new songs when they come out, when friends send them to me. But I kind of actively try to stay as disconnected as I can, especially to hip hop, because I want, not to compare myself to those who are doing well, or better than I am, or greater things than I am doing. But also, I don't want to sound a single thing like what is on the radio and what is on the charts and the blogs right now. I want to stand out forever. And if that means being underground forever, that's cool. If that means blowing up and starting an entire new genre that people copy me, that's okay. I just want to feel like me and I want to sound like me,
Well, that is beautifully said. And that as you've been very good about doing in this interview, that leads directly into my next question, which is the first of the two rapid fire ones I always ask at the end. Number one is, so you just pointed out that you really try to not listen to things going on right now. And I think that's evident when you hear your music, because, you know, I have you both on my get hyped running mix and also on my chill mental health mix. And you're one of the few that's on both of those, you know what I mean? Which is really shows that the sort of span of your work. Who, you already mentioned Blink-182. I always ask my guests, who influences them? Who should we be checking out? And you know, that you can limit that to music if you want, or you can also talk about who you're reading and all that.
Right on. Well, dude, I mean, Blink-182 is a constant. I was born in 1988. I've been listening to them my whole life. I don't care who says what about Blink-182. That's my shit. And it's funny because the only thing that I had left with me during quarantine was this old bass guitar. I also work here in Nelson at a creative agency. I'm a digital branding and marketing specialist and project manager. But my creative director left me this shitty bass. He's like, I don't need it. You know, you're going to be sad. Like, play Carousel. And so I did start playing Carousel. And then I was like, dude, I'm going to write an EP with this bass. And I started recording riffs and little ditties and whatnot and structurized some songs. And I sent them to Samuel Steesmore, also one of our OG homies from the Space Cake.
I remember.
He souped them up into tracks. I wrote lyrics. I sent them to my buddy Jerry Plumpy in LA with Matt Decent. And he plumped them up. And we're going to release a 2-song record on June 5th called Lost and Found. First song's called Lost. Second song's called Found. Nice. And it's the story about life and loss and love and loss and the things inside of us that kind of rip us apart. It's the good and the bad. It's the yin, the yang, and it's the good times and the bad times, bro, that both of which should not be forgotten. There's some cool movie samples, as always, in Hoodie Time songs. Lost features some of the Lost Boys from the movie Hook with nice. Dante Basco plays Rufio. So we got some of Dante Basco and some Robin Williams in there. Shout out Dante. If you listen to this, I'll send it to you, bro. And yeah, so that was like the first time in a while that my Blink influence had been completely physically evident. I was like, I'm into it. I'm gonna write these songs. And they ended up to be a sweet fusion of kind of that classic pop punk sound with super heavy hitting 808s and trap flair to it. And it's a totally new Hoodie sound, but it is totally Hoodie. So right now I'm still on the Blink. And if we got to talk about some other real quick just mentions of who's hot, I love this producer from France called Pandrez, Pandrezz. Everything he makes is gold. He makes super awesome jazz influenced hip hop beats. Most of them are complete instrumentals, maybe with a little bit of vocal sample. Every song marries the rock, jazz, hip hop, and electronic house genres very well.
I just gave him a follow. I will check him out as soon as we're over here. So last one that I always ask is, you know, what are your mental health or your self-care habits, not only during COVID and for you, especially not only when you're touring, although I'm sure you have some that you really focus on because touring can be very hectic.
Yeah, they work for me, but they are difficult to always employ. Let me say that. These are difficult and they are daily work. You gotta set an iPhone reminder every 5 minutes. My number one is honesty and openness with what's going on inside me, especially with Liat. We live together. It's been 7 weeks now of lockdown, so we're all each other's got. And of course, before COVID and everything, it's not just new with COVID, but we both always remind each other how important it is to let the other in. Even if it's just a notice, hey, this is going on in my head. I don't want to take it any further with conversation, but I want you to know. Even if it's just a notice, it's good to get a notice out. Like we were talking about earlier, the human connection thing, man. I think that I am much more likely to be okay with myself if I let others know who I am. I think that I am much more capable of getting over myself or what's inside my head if I let people know it's going on. And I think that my biggest downfall or flaw is when I don't let people know what's going on. That leads to conflict, and that's always my fault. So that's number one, I think, for sure. And the other is reminding myself that it is okay to not play a show or to not make a song or to not show up to the office or to work from home or to take a vacation day when you don't leave the house for my mental health. I think that we are growing up in an era where we've seen both sides of the coin. We've seen the hiding of mental health, both by those going through it and by parents and doctors and the media. It was silenced. No one talked about it. And now I think we're seeing the end of that era where artists and musicians and influencers not only are sharing their stories going through it, but are normalizing that stigma. So we've seen kind of both sides of it. Yeah, the human connection thing, and just reminding myself that it's okay to be me, it's okay to feel what I'm feeling, and it's okay to take a breather and a day off if I need one. Oftentimes, you hear stories about people who go to work and they only have X amount of vacation days, or they can't swap because the manager needs, extra hands on a Saturday, the American 40-hour week story. And people are afraid to use that 8 hours of vacation time, or to use that 8 hours of sick time, or to say, hey, this job itself is toxic. I can find another one and leave. I think that is my number two thing is telling myself, don't feel bad because you took a breather.
Tell us where we can find you and where we can follow you, and we'll wrap it up there.
Right on. Just Google Hoodie Time. HOODYTIME.
Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast and then thought, man, I don't even know where to begin? Well, I have the perfect answer for you. It's Anchor. They have all the tools you need to get started right away, all in one spot. You can do it from your phone or your computer. They'll even distribute for you, so you don't have to go looking for places to get your podcast out. But the best part is it's all free. That's right. You can sign up today without any hassle at all. You can even start making money right from the beginning. It's everything you need in a podcast in one place. So check it out today. Go to anchor.fm or download the free Anchor app to get started. All right, we've reached the end of another episode of the Choose Your Struggle podcast. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Joey Talmadge, aka Hoodie Time. We were in those rooms together. We were going through the same thing. Not the same thing. Our stories were similar, and neither one of us was talking to the other one during it. We were partying. We had a great time, as you could hear in that interview. But neither one of us was talking about how much we were suffering. None of us were. If you take anything away from this, from hearing Joey and I reminisce together and talk about our experience, talk to your friends. Talk to the people you love. Ask them how they're doing. And tell them about what you're going through. We don't do enough of that. I want you to go listen to a podcast if you have a moment. One of my closest friends in the world, I've shouted out this podcast before. Cookies for Breakfast by Spark Tabor. He puts a lot of this in words that I think are very helpful for a lot of people. You can find it wherever you find your podcast. It was this week's episode, this week, June 1st. He and I talked a lot about the intro to this episode that you heard. I recorded it in anger, in pain, in sadness. I thought a lot of it needed to be said, but I wasn't sure that I was the right person to say it. There's one thing that I didn't do a good job of. One cardinal sin that I made on that intro, and I have to correct it here. I failed to say their names. That is a cardinal sin, and I screwed that one up, and I apologize. We see these headlines. They're horrible, and obviously the incidents are terrible. These people weren't born and given the name unarmed black person. They have names. They are people. And I fucked that up. I did not say their name. So here they are. The case in Tallahassee was Tony McDade. Obviously, we all know the cases of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. In Louisville, it was David McCatty. I hope I said it right. If I didn't, I apologize. But do your research. It's that easy. Search Google. And you can actually go to Wikipedia. There are so many that you can go to Wikipedia. And there are pages dedicated to the cases of police murder in America. There are so many that Wikipedia has pages for them all. I didn't believe that when someone told me, so I looked, and they're there. They're broken down by month, going all the way back to 2009, and before that, they're broken down by year. This is an epidemic in this country. This is an epidemic in the world. We have to say their names. I do want to apologize to Joey Talmadge. Our interview was a really good time. I think you hear that in the way we talk. We are old friends. He's a guy that I think is doing just awesome work. Please go listen to his music. But I definitely co-opted this episode a little bit to talk about these issues. It's not a normal episode for those who know this podcast. And by extension, it's not going to be a normal ending. There's no choose your card. There's no good egg. Because your good egg is just do something. My wife and I are going to a protest this weekend. I've also donated around $10,000. Look, for those who don't know me and are listening, I was born into privilege. I say that clearly in the first part. I have the money. It is more important to do good things with it. So I've donated to about $10,000 worth of black causes. I've used my voice when I thought it was important to do so. And when I haven't had the right words, I've amplified others. Please listen to other people. Show love. Show empathy. I love you all. Choose your struggle, and Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. And now we rolling through Paris. Blowing Eiffel Towers with a sweet and a sour. That's flower. Say Beulah, that's Paris. And now we rolling through Paris. At the Moulin Rouge with a girl from Bruges. Bonsoir, Big Terrace. Hey. And now we rolling through Paris. Blowing Eiffel Towers with a sweet and a sour. That's flower. Say Beulah, that's Paris. And now we rolling through Paris. At the Moulin Rouge with a girl from Bruges. Bonsoir, Big Terrace. Hey.